When we come to mutual funds, once again there is a certification by the NISM, National Institute of Securities Markets. Not at all difficult to pass. People do it. But that does not make you a good advisor. The same kind of targets that you have in the insurance industry, you also have in mutual funds. Focus is always on quantity, not quality. AUM, if you have heard that term, assets under management. Fees are charged by the mutual fund on assets under management. So if a mutual fund has 10,000 crores of assets under management and we are charging 2% on the average, we are earning 200 crores. But if I have got not 10,000 crores but 1 lakh crores under management, I am getting 2,000 crores. So my focus is quantity. I need assets under management. The maximum possible should go there. People churn, get out of one, get into another. Instead of genuinely increasing AUM by good products like the systematic investment plans long term, costs are not disclosed. Although the costs are far lower than the insurance industry, there are still certain products that are quite costly in the mutual fund space. Many times, more importance is given to tax saving than genuine investment. Where corporates are concerned, they will chase hot money always, because many times a company is able to give you 25-50 crores. Same amount, if you are to get from normal investors, the kind of effort you have to put in is enormous. So, a lot of mutual fund agents and even mutual funds chase the big companies, pander to their investment officers and try to get money that way. There is mass selling in mutual funds. There is no regard to category or circumstances of the investor. This results in a kind of unethical selling. Sometimes you sell some dangerous equity sector funds to even retired people. I've had people really suffering losses when the markets turn, and that too people like retired teachers, widows, spinsters losing money. A classic case that came to me a few years back. My firm only takes individual investors. We don't take institutions. We don't like institutional business. So I don't take institutions, except very few where some of our clients are either trustees or directors of institutions, and then they make a request to also take some investments of them. But as a rule, we don't entertain institutions. Now, one particular case came to me because an institution wanted to consult me. And when I looked at the particular investment, a mutual fund distributor had put 25 lakh rupees in a tax saving equity fund. When I looked at the institution, this institution has tax-free status under the Income Tax Act. So first question that arises is, you have put 25 lakhs into a tax-saving investment. What was the need for tax saving? The institution is not paying tax. It is tax-free. They have got exemption under Section 12. The disadvantage is that once the money is put there, you cannot withdraw it for 3 years. Third question is, even if it was an individual, and you are putting a tax saving investment, you should never have put more than, at that time I think the limit was 1 lakh under Section 80C. Why 25 lakhs? The reason is very simple. In a tax saving investment, since the money is blocked for 3 years, the mutual fund knows that for 3 years they can charge expenses. Therefore, that kind of captive money, the commissions are more. And that institutional head got so angry, he dragged the mutual fund distributor to my office and made me question him in front. I asked him, don't you know this institution is tax free? And that chap was not talking, just his head was down. Why did you put so much? Don't you know that you have hampered their liquidity? They may be long-term investors, But when you have got a less liquid choice, why did you go here? So a lot of these kind of things will happen. And of course, one joke that used to happen formerly, now things have slightly improved, were the mutual fund statutory warnings. Especially when you heard them on TV. They repeat those words so fast. Mutual funds are subject to market risk. Read the offer document carefully before investing. You don't even know in what language it's being said. Actually, a good advisor should first start with the risk. What is the risk? How do I make somebody comfortable with risk? Moving ahead, let's come to stockbrokers. I've never been in insurance, but in 1985, I started life in the stockbroking industry. So this is one industry where I know pretty well. I criticized insurance agents quite a bit. They are not the most dangerous people in the financial services industry. The most dangerous people are stockbrokers. I have not come across people running away or committing suicide because they bought a wrong insurance policy. They have suffered a lot because of wrong types of insurance. But I have come across people actually running away, committing suicide because of stockbrokers. The first step is nobody has an inkling about what equity investment is all about. Therefore, the stockbrokers pervert the whole thing totally. Equity investment is essentially very, very long term. Warren Buffett said, our licenses are forever. The correct holding period for stock market investments is forever. You have to be long term. And the actual successful investors in the stock market are people who have held their stocks across decades. Very often they pass on their portfolios to the next generation. They sell only when they need and to the extent they need. Whenever they have the money, they continue buying good stocks. Of course, some stocks will go bankrupt, into liquidation. Does not matter. It is part and parcel of stock market investing. But what stockbrokers do is, stockbrokers first and foremost tell you the stock market investment is complicated. We have got the best possible research department. We will tell you or teach you how to invest. We will take decisions on your behalf. Long-term investment is nonsense. It is when you sell that's very important. You have to constantly monitor everything. You have to buy, sell. Nobody realizes that there is nothing more wrong than this. Why is this done? It is done because I want to make you trade as much as you can. Because every time you trade, every time you buy or sell, brokerage is generated. If you sit holding your portfolio for the long term, I think no brokerage is generated for me. And once again, to give you insider terms, butchers and bakras. The people in the stockbroker's office who operate the trading terminals, they are actually referred to as butchers. And the clients who walk in are bakras. And the average lifespan of a speculator is 6 months. In 6 months, you'll find a totally new set of clients. That's why the most important people in a stockbroker's office are the sales staff. They have to go and keep on getting new bakras. Feed them into the machine. They'll come out dead the other side after average of 6 months. Get the new set of bakras. That's how it goes on. That's how it goes on. It keeps on online, offline, going to the. We have seen enough of these kind of cases. Margin trading and day trading. Trade within the day, buy in the morning, sell in the evening. Margin trading, SEBI allows this. It's actually a practice I don't agree with at all. You have got 50,000 rupees, you keep that as a margin, the broker will finance you another 50,000 rupees. So it becomes 1 lakh. The broker is not giving you that 50,000 free. He will charge you a stiff interest for it. You are encouraged to go beyond your capacity. My capacity was 50,000, now I am allowed to go up to 1 lakh. Do I want to go higher than 1 lakh with my 50,000? Yes, it's possible. There are the futures markets. Make your 50,000 now a deposit in the futures market. You can go 5 times, 2,50,000. Something goes wrong, the broker will just cut your position, and there are very sophisticated systems in the market called risk management systems. That term risk management is very misleading. You think they are managing the investor's risk. Sorry, they are managing the market risk. And in the process, they are taking care of brokers. So the broker knows how much of money to collect. The system tells him. Moment you don't have the margin and you don't pay extra money, it is mercilessly cut. There is no way you can lodge a complaint because you have signed what is called a client account opening form. Pages after pages of fine print. You have said that you know that what you are doing is risky. Risk disclosure document is a part of the account opening form. You accept it, you have been briefed. You have not read a single line. I have not come across a single client who read a single line of the account opening form in a stockbroker's office. There was only one client I remember who had lived his life in Dubai. Now he is well into his 70s. He believed in reading every word. So when he had come, he had some shares in the physical form which he had to dematerialize. He had to open a client and demat account for that, and then there were some things he wanted to sell, some things he wanted to distribute to some of his children. So he told me, I'm signing so many pages without knowing. I said, yes, but I can give you a choice. I'm not asking you to sign this. Take this form home without signing it. Read it and come back. Come back tomorrow, day after tomorrow, then we'll fill it up. Or then our staff will help you to go through the process. He said, thank you, and he went. He came back 2 days later, and I found him filling up everything. Then I casually asked him, so you read the whole form? No, he said. I read 3/4 of 1 page. That's about out of about 17, 18 pages. 3/4 of 1 page, and I got such a headache. No, I could not manage to proceed further. So the wordings are so cumbersome. Nobody understands what's happening. Nobody understands what's happening. I'll give you one more example. A senior citizen lady once opened a client and demat account with a Bombay stockbroking firm which had its office in Mangalore. Because one of her neighbors, a young girl who had finished her MBA, got a job in that office. 5 lakh rupees was entrusted, and that girl said, you will get 20-30% returns, stock market trading, we know how to do it. And slowly the contract notes started coming home, and the lady didn't know how to read a contract note for the transactions done. Statements of account started coming, she didn't know that also. She just kept them somewhere, or half of them she even threw. Trading went on. The lady is happy. She thinks that this girl is doing something or the office is doing something, and therefore her money is growing. Slowly the contract notes started getting less and less. Everything suddenly stopped. Meanwhile, the lady had some family functions. She neglected for some time. One day, she got a registered notice from the head office of the stockbroking company in Bombay. You owe some 73,000 rupees. Now look at this. I gave you 5 lakh rupees. You are the experts. You traded. At the end of the trading, you are asking me to pay 73,000 rupees. My 5 lakhs is gone. There are no profits on it. And now I owe you money. The lady didn't know what to do. Her relation was a leading criminal lawyer, or is a leading criminal lawyer in this city. And I know him. So he took an appointment and brought the lady here. When I saw the lady, she was almost 70 years of age. So I went through whatever papers they had. I said, when you opened your account, didn't you sign some? Oh yes, I signed some 20-30 pages. Where is the copy of that? Nobody has given me the copy. So the first thing you do is go to the Mangalore office of this and insist that you are given a photocopy of your client and Demat account opening form. When she went to the office, she got a shock. The office is virtually defunct. Only one person is sitting there pressing some keys on a computer. So she asks the person, where are all the, what's happened? No, this office is closed. I'm just sending some last reports, and in a week or two, we are closing this office. Then we wrote a registered letter to the head office. Head office sent the photocopies of the client and Demat opening form. Then I called these people for another appointment, and I showed them how on every page this lady has signed. Where something has been filled in, she has signed. At the end of the client and Demat account opening form, there's a power of attorney. That also she has signed. And what does the power of attorney say? I authorize this stockbroker to trade on my behalf. And any amount of clauses are there. Any losses, anything, stock market is risky, stock market is volatile. Any losses, I will not hold anyone responsible. I have been told what is being done. I know that it is risky. I accept the risk. All these kind of clauses. So I told the lawyer, you are a lawyer. You will file a case. What case are you going to file? I said the luckiest person will be the lawyer of the stockbroker. You know why? He does not have to prepare any case at all. You file your case. When the time comes for cross-examination, you are going to put this 70-year-old aunt of yours in the witness box. And he will ask page by page, is this your signature? Did you sign this? Did you receive this? Didn't you know? Haven't you read these clauses? Aren't you an educated woman? When the time comes for argument, once again he does not have to prepare. He has to take your own application form and start reading. Charge the broker a fat fee, you will lose the case. The broker will win the case. The lawyer understood it immediately. There was another case. You must have heard of Ketan Parekh. Ketan Parekh was a member of the stock market, was involved in a huge scam involving cooperative banks. He had an office in Mangalore. The office, of course, in the aftermath of the scam, it closed. When it closed, there was one girl who was an employee of that office, who on her own came to my office and asked for a job. I'm very reluctant to take anybody from another broker's office, even if the office has closed, simply because I know what kind of environment they are coming from. But somehow when I spoke to this girl, she sounded totally different, and she appeared to have been uncomfortable with the kind of goings on there. Then I realized she was not in trading, she was just in back office. So there was a vacancy at that time in our mutual fund section, so I employed her, and she turned out to be an excellent employee. When she was going through some records, she suddenly came across a name. So she came and asked me, was this person a client here? I said yes. And then he stopped being a client. I said he was actually a very good man. He was an engineer working for one of the companies here. To speak to, very nice and very intelligent. But a short while after he became our client, my staff warned me, see, this man is trying to do some trading on his own. And in our office there is no such thing. Nobody can trade. So once I called, listen, we don't do these kind of things here. If you want to do trading, especially this kind of speculation, best is to open an account somewhere else, close your account here and go there. He said, no, I'm sorry, I should not have done it and all that. For some time, once again, things were okay. Then once again our staff cautioned me, this man is trading. Second time I said, listen, I've told you once, now we are closing your account. Straight. Once again he begged, pleaded. I said, no, sorry. This time I've given you one warning. I don't keep on giving warnings. So straight away his account was closed, and that's the last I saw. Then this girl tells me, you don't know what happened to him? I said, no. He committed suicide a short while back. Why? Trading, heavy losses, virtually went bankrupt, committed suicide. And he's got a family. He's got wife and children. Nobody thinks of that. So when I say that stockbrokers are the most dangerous animals in the financial services industry, I say this with a lot of experience. I've seen this happening too many times. The kind of misery that they have caused by wrong advice, by a total wrong approach to equity investment, you can't even believe it. There's many times a conflict of interest. The broker will advise something, broker will do something else. Non-disclosure of costs. Even if you trade with the same sum of money and assume, of course it's mathematically, it's impossible in real life, but if you assume that you have got a certain amount of money and you are being charged a very low brokerage of 0.1%, and the profits you make are just enough to take care of that brokerage, and this is going on throughout 1 year. In 1 year, there are 250 trading days. Every day you are trading equal to your capital. Let's say it's 10 lakh rupees. So every day you are doing 10 lakh rupees worth of trading. You are paying 0.1% as brokerage. In 250 days, 250 into 0.1, the brokerage you pay is 25% of your capital. Correct? Which means, if you make profits or returns of 25%, which is very high, 25% on your capital, you have not earned 1 rupee. Why? The entire 25% went as brokerage. So to earn anything, you have to earn more than 25%. But now you have to place that in the correct perspective. You have to see what are the long-term returns on the stock market in India. We have to use the BSE sensitive index. The BSE sensitive index was first calculated in 1979. And from 1979 till today, the returns are about 15.38 or 15.4% compounded. Now when the long-term returns in the market are 15%. If you are day trading, you are going to possibly incur at least 25% of costs just on trading. Is it ever humanly possible to make profits? But the brokerage industry thrives on the same principle as a casino. So once in a way you will find somebody saying stock markets are like casinos. Absolutely correct. Stockbrokers, not stock markets, but stockbrokers' offices. They are nothing but gambling dens. You are made to trade day in and day out. Suddenly somebody will make money. Everybody looks at them and thinks, I too will make. They don't see whether that person is making money consistently. And behavioral economics tells us that we are all pleasure seekers. We always go after pleasure. So pleasant memories remain in our minds. We try to get rid of the unpleasant memories. If I have done 10 stock market transactions, I have lost in 7 but I have made money in 3. At parties I will be talking about only the 3 where I made money. I'll be remembering only the 3 where I have made money. The 7 are swept under the mental carpet. But when I look at my balance sheet or my profit and loss account, it is more of a loss and loss account, not a profit and loss account. These are things that we do not understand. There are different types of brokerage structures. Now they say no percentage, flat brokerage, pay 5,000 a month, trade as much as you want. But to be an effective investor, the less you trade, the better it is. That nobody tells you. Sometimes even the regulators' rules act against an investor. For example, there is one rule called dormant accounts. If you do not trade, different brokers set up different things, some 1 year, some 2 years. If there's no transaction at all in your client account or demat account for 1 year, let's say, you cannot trade again unless you sign a form, send it to the broker to reactivate your account. The way it is projected, as if dormant account is something bad. I would say dormant accounts are the best accounts. It means that somebody is not doing anything there. Somebody is holding on for the long term. Or if you only buy, that is fine. Then your account does not get dormant because there's a transaction happening. But they say this because of investor protection. Nobody should try to fiddle around with that account. So even if somebody is in the US, for example, has invested in stocks, not done anything for 4 years, now wants to sell for some reason, cannot sell. Now we have to send a form, then they have to sign that form, courier it back. The dormant account has to be reactivated. Only after that you can sell. So these kind of things sometimes create annoyance. How effective they are, nobody knows. I can tell you they are not effective. Do you know what brokers do? There are a number of brokers who take blank reactivation forms and keep inside. So 3 years later, if the client is saying, I want to sell, you want to sell, okay. The form is dated, placed there, account becomes active. So sometimes there is quite a bit of stupidity even on the regulatory side. Tips, information and research. I can give you the hottest tip of all. A lot of people ask me at parties and say, what's the hottest tip in the market? I said, I'll give you the hottest tip. The hottest tip in the market is do not ask for hot tips. That's the hottest tip. It's not a hot tip, it's the hottest tip. Because any other tips, you will get burnt. They are so hot that you will get burnt. Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher, said, those who have knowledge don't predict. Those who predict don't have knowledge. You have got these brokers' research reports, recommendations. All of them are utterly and thoroughly useless. You should know the intention behind them. The intention is to make you trade repeatedly. They will say that we have got research departments, we visit factories, we have got meets with the managing directors, we have got so many other things. These are such absurd jokes. By visiting factories, by speaking to some company spokespersons, what can you learn? Satyam Computers board of directors, forget about other people, the board of directors did not know that there was a scam until they got a fax message that morning from Mr. Raju. So what will an analyst know when the board of directors did not know it? So you can do what research you like. You will not be able to come out with concrete results. The misrepresentation of commodities and derivatives as investment avenues. In a casino, if there is only one game, what do you think will happen to that casino? However interesting the game, there is only one game. In a few weeks or months, that casino will close. Why? Human beings like variety. You have to have a diversified set of games suited to different people. Each one has to have its own hype. In a stockbroker's office, there will be one terminal for cash trading, BSE, one terminal for cash trading, NSE, one derivatives terminal of BSE, one derivatives terminal of National Stock Exchange. Then there will be a commodities, one of the commodities, that terminal will be there. So you can speculate from copper to crude oil to coffee to whatever you want. There will be a currency trading. So if you get bored with one, you can jump to the other. If somebody detects that you are feeling bored, there's something else. These are superb marketing tricks. Do you know how things work in the star hotels or the very good hotels? It's Saturday evening, you have not made a booking. You go for dinner with some friend or with your family. You want a table for 4 or 5. When you go outside the restaurant door, you already see 15 people waiting there. You don't have the patience to wait. So you say, okay, I know one or two other places where it is less crowded. As you walk away and go downstairs, somebody with a neat suit will come to you and say, sir, I just saw you going in, you are leaving. No, there's too much of crowd there, we'll come back. No, we have a buffet in another place. Okay, they'll try to divert you within the organization. So somewhere, you don't have to wait there, you can straight away. If you don't mind the buffet, why don't you go there? You will not be able to order a la carte. Immediately you are diverted. The same thing happens in a stockbroker's office. You have been burnt in the stock market. No, commodities. You can make a lot of money back. It's not like stocks, it's much better. Much better, of course, for the broking firm. It need not be for the client. So this constant churning takes place in stockbrokers' offices, and they have very low or no educational qualifications. If at all there's some certification, I've seen the certification because we ourselves have to write those exams or attend those courses. Extremely basic, extremely basic. It does not guarantee good advising. Above all, there is no fiduciary relationship. The relationship of somebody being in a position of trust. I'm a trustee of my client's money. That is called a fiduciary relationship. Putting the interest of the client first. That is absolutely absent. Absolutely absent. This is where ethics comes into play. There are hardly any professions where the service provider's interest is so diametrically opposite that of the client's. So this is the sad position we have in the stockbroking industry.